much today, so much pain, so much sorrow. Only scandals on the front page. We need brighter days and hope for tomorrow. Now is the time to show the world positivity. Shining our light, revealing the good in you and me. The Drop, all that's good in community. The Drop, showing the love that we all need. The Drop, lifting our friends and family. The Drop, oh, let us be the Drop.
Welcome back to Be the Drop podcast. I am thrilled that you have joined us again. So let's start with a word of prayer. So Father God, we thank you for this opportunity to learn and to grow. As we dive into this episode, please give us knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Let our hearts be encouraged and our spirits be filled with your peace. Guide our learning, help us to apply this knowledge with wisdom and care, and remind us that with you, all things are possible. All right, amen. So in our previous episode, we embarked on this exciting path together, focusing on laying a strong foundation for your nursing studies. We talked about the importance of integrating your faith with your learning. And we dove into some crucial general test-taking strategies to help you feel more confident and prepare you for any exam that comes your way, whether it's your course exam while you're in nursing school or the actual NCLEX itself. We touched on everything from carving out dedicated study time and the power of prayer before you test. We talked about understanding the exam formats before you take an exam, practicing active reading, managing your time wisely, and of course, reviewing your answers, thoughtfully, and the incredible strength of staying positive through everything, reminding ourselves of Philippians 4, verses 6 and 7. So extremely important concepts to keep in mind, and it's just a really good way to do life, right? Being positive, the cup being half full, but yet living out your purpose. So, get ready to level up or level up in your test-taking, skills and in life. But for today, test-taking skills. Because today in this episode, we are zeroing in on specific types of test questions that is a must for you to master. And those types of questions are priority types of questions. That is what today is about. Those type of questions that says, which action should the nurse take first? Or which client should the nurse assess immediately? Or sometimes it comes right out and say priority. So these questions require a different kind of thinking, a real analysis of the situation to determine the most critical need, the priority. However, big however, did you know that there are specific steps and strategies that you can use to tackle these priority questions and boost your chances of getting them correct every time? Well, you're in for a treat today because that is exactly what we are going to do. Provide you with steps that will help you get to the correct answer with these types of questions every time. So let's back up. First thing first, when a test question is written properly, it should have a level of difficulty attached to it. So in case you're not familiar, exams are made using Bloom's taxonomy. The NCLEX is certainly made using Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy is a classification of learning objectives that is used within education. So often students are not aware of that. I do teach Bloom's taxonomy whenever I have the opportunity because I believe it's important for you to know how your test is made. And I've tested this to where when you explain to students how the exam is made, it's a more successful process for them. So for example, let me give you an example that you may be able to relate to. let's say, we're both standing in a room and I just walk over to you and I shove you. You're probably not ready for that impact because you didn't know I was going to do that. You were taken by surprise. Not that I would ever do that, by the way, but if I tell you I'm going to walk over to you and shove you, you're going to be a little bit more defensive now. You might widen your stance, you might be ready for the impact, or you might very well defend yourself. So that's how I see this. I see where, and I've tested where the more the students know about the exam and how the questions are made, the more successful they are. So that's part of these sessions, is to teach you about the test so that you're ready to take the test and be successful in taking the test. So well, let's back up again. If you're not familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, there's different levels to it. Think of it as a tier, the bottom tier, like steps, right? From bottom up. Or, for example, the bottom tier would be knowledge. And then from knowledge, we go to comprehension. From comprehension, we go to application. From application, analysis, and then eventually evaluation. But let's start from the bottom tier, okay? So knowledge. A knowledge type of question is just assessing pretty much remote memorization type of information. Do you recall, or can you recall, or can you define, or identify, recognize? It's something you memorize and you just regurgitating it. It doesn't require high level of thinking. You read it, you remembered it. So a good example would be your vital signs. If I ask you a test question where I say, what is the normal range of sodium, right? 135 to 145. That is something you just memorized. So that is the beginning of the building block. Okay, that is the beginning of building that knowledge to where you get to the critical thinking. This is just you recalling, remembering knowledge that you were introduced to or that you spent some time memorizing. Nothing difficult about that. I would say that's a level 1. Level 2 would be you showing that you comprehend, right? You understand, you grasp the meaning of the material. So not only can you recall it, but you understand it. So that's a level 2 when you get to that comprehension type of question. So let's stick with the sodium lab value. So it's good that you remember the range, right? The therapeutic range of sodium, but do you understand what it means? Right? Do you understand the impact of sodium in the client's body? What happens when it's high or when it's low, when it's out of that therapeutic range? Do you understand? And the next step would be applying that knowledge. So you recall the knowledge, you comprehend the knowledge, can you now apply it? Okay, so you have to be able to use that knowledge and comprehension in new situations, right? Can you carry it out? Can you operate, produce? Those words show that you are not just recalling and regurgitating, but can you put this to good use? So it's good to know that your sodium is high, right? Hypernatremia or hyponatremia. But not only can you tell me what this means, but you know what to do when it's high or it's low. And then for NCLEX purposes, analysis is the 4th level. So that is you understanding both the content and the structure of the material. So that does require higher level thinking. So you would be at the critical thinking point at that stage. You can analyze it, compare it, contrast it, differentiate it from what else is going on. So those are the levels of difficulty with questions. So anyone who writes test questions are to know what level of difficulty this question is set, right? Am I just trying to pull information out of the student? So normally in your prerequisite type of class, your anatomy, physiology, chemistry, micro. So those classes generally do ask you straightforward type of questions. But as you get into your core classes, your NUR courses, your actual nursing courses, it has to change because we have to be able to assess your critical thinking, not just you knowing the normal range or the therapeutic range. So let me give you an example. Let's start with a level 2 because I think you can pretty much get the concept of a level 1. Let's say, for example, you have a client who's placed on a low residue diet because they have Crohn's disease. So the question could ask you, what type of food would you provide this client? So a question like that is testing to see that you understand low residue diet. That's a level 2. It's me testing your understanding of that low residue diet. And we would have different options for you to be able to show based on your choice that you understand what a low residue diet is. And often I want you students to start thinking of opposites up and down, left and right. So if I'm questioning your low residue diet, high residue diet has to be crossing your mind. If I'm questioning you on hyponatremia, hypernatremia has to be crossing your mind. And this is very true with the endocrine system. When we get to that system and I'm breaking down content in that area, go ahead and think hyper and hypo opposite because the endocrine system is very much like that, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So that's some of the things that are coming up soon. So the difference between knowledge and comprehension, knowledge is you knowing facts, right? What did you read? What was the fact? No putting one and two together, you just recalling facts. To answer comprehension questions level 2, you must understand the significance of the facts. So that's the difference between level 1 and level 2 with knowledge and comprehension. And when we get to level 3 application, you're required to, show, solve, modify, change, use, manipulate, a lot of different action words that shows that, yeah, you do understand this and now you can apply it. So this is the level where you're linking information. Right? So a client comes in with GI upset, nausea, and vomiting, and they give you all of these, subjective data, and you do your assessment and you get some objective data, and then you have to try and connect the dots. What could be causing this? Okay? So that's the big difference at that level. Okay? So now with analysis level, which is where I'm going to get into some steps for you for those priorities types of questions. So at a level 4, your analysis level, you are required to be able to interpret a variety of data and recognize what's common, right? What are the commonalities? What's the differences? What's the relationship between these ideas or how the client presents to you? So at that level, we have to assume that you understand, and you can apply. You know the why, okay? So you are at a completely different level. So grab your paper and your pen or pencil. Let's jot this down, okay? So let me also go over with you a couple of different statements that will help you to ID a higher level question, okay? And then we'll go into the steps. The moment you see those type of questions, what do you do? Okay, so you will see statements like the nurse is caring for a client. Which of the following actions should the nurse initiate first? That word first is key. So jot that down. When you see they're asking you what's the first thing to do. Here's another example. The nurse is caring for a post-operative client. Which of the following assessment findings should the nurse report to the provider immediately? Right? That tells you there's a priority with that because of the word immediately. Here's another one. The nurse is caring for a client with the following assessment findings, whatever they may be. And then the part of the question that asks the question says, which of the following is the next action the nurse should take? Those are all priorities. So you can see how they all emphasize that crucial element of priority: first, best, initial, immediate. So to ace these types of questions, you need a systematic way to get to the correct answer. And there is one. And that is exactly what we are exploring. So are you ready to learn some powerful tools to conquer, to dominate these priority types of questions? So step 1, Whenever you are asked what is the first, the best, the initial, the priority, the immediate, you have to think of the nursing process. Now, I plan to do an episode in the future breaking down the nursing process for you. But for now, I have to tell you the nursing process is used to make these types of questions. So whenever we ask you what's the best thing, first thing, initial thing, priority thing, you have to think of the nursing process. And if you remember, the nursing process tells you to always, 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 always assess first. That is how we operate. Nursing runs that way. It is who we are. It runs through your veins and it makes sense. How can you come up with your nursing problem if you have not assessed? You cannot. How can you implement? What are you going to implement for? You have not assessed. You can't evaluate. So the rest of the domino for the nursing process cannot happen unless you assess. So please, the moment you see first, best, initial, priority, you must think of the nursing process. So the question you have to ask yourself is, have I assessed? If in your scenario you have assessed, then you can go ahead and implement something. But that depends too, because sometimes you may need to validate. If you're getting subjective data, the client says to you, you need to validate, right? Because client walks into the emergency room and tells you that they have appendicitis. You're not going to just believe they have appendicitis. You're going to need to validate that. So pay attention. Is it subjective data? Right? We validate with diagnostic tests. Okay? So you have to ask yourself, have you assessed? So if you have assessed, then you can implement something. If you have not assessed, then the first thing, the best thing, the initial thing, the priority thing is to assess. So you must remove anything and everything that is not an assessment. Now, sometimes I see students get stuck. They don't know the difference between assessment and implementation. Let me break it down for you. Assessments only give you information. It gives you a number. It gives you data. It does not change the client status. It does not. An implementation does. Implementation changes client status. So you take a blood pressure, you get a number. You give the labetalol, that impacts the client's blood pressure. You do your blood sugar, you get a number. You get the point. An assessment only gives you information. It does not change the client status. So if you're wondering, is this an assessment or is this an implementation? Ask yourself, is it going to change the client status? Will it make them better or worse? Hopefully better. Then it's an implementation. So that is step one. Step one, have I assessed? If you've assessed, do you need to validate that? If you have assessments. If you have not assessed, remove every implementation. Your correct answer is an assessment. So if I did mention this last time, yeah, I did. I have an episode where I talked about you doing questions via what we call process of elimination. You must go through your options and use these steps that I'm teaching you and remove what you know is for sure incorrect so that you are left with the correct option. Extremely important. Okay? So now you may have all assessments and all implementations. That's okay. You're just going to go to step two. But the whole point of these steps is to eliminate incorrect options. So if that's the case, go to step two if you were not able to eliminate. That's fine. Because the whole point, when you have a mixture of assessment and implementations, you get to eliminate something. I'd rather be choosing between 3 options or 2 options than 4 options. That's a better scenario. So now step 2 is Maslow's hierarchy. So if you are not familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, you need to be. So Maslow has that triangle tier, okay? The bottom tier is your physical needs. So physical needs are air. Now think about the physical needs. If you want to group them all, without it, you'll die. Okay? Without air, we will die. Food, we will die. Water, we will die. Right? But let's complicate this a little bit. If you have not heard of the word homeostasis, you need to be familiar with that. So homeostasis is really having a therapeutic range. Everything requires a therapeutic range. Your electrolytes require a therapeutic range. We're talking about sodium. We want it between 135 milliequivalents to 145 milliequivalents. Lower than 135 is not good. Higher is not good. We want that therapeutic range. Without it, you will see some signs and symptoms, right? Clients will show signs and symptoms, and we need to intervene. If we don't intervene, they could potentially die. So that goes with your lab work, CBC, HNH. So we want a therapeutic range. So often we think, yeah, physical needs are food, air, water, absolutely. But homeostasis is a big key. You need to remember everything requires a therapeutic range. Too much sunlight, what happens? Skin cancer, right? Not enough sunlight. We don't process vitamins. So we need the right amount all the time. The next level with Maslow's hierarchy is safety. Now, with physiological needs, if you don't address these, the client dies, like they die. But with safety needs, they get hurt and could potentially die. So safety is a big part of NCLEX, and safety is a large category because safety goes from preconception until somebody dies. So imagine throughout the lifespan, safety is a big deal. So the unborn child, right? The mother has to, not change the cat litter, toxoplasmosis, don't go in a sauna, don't take any type of medications, it crosses the placenta. Like we could go on and on and on of the different things that the mother need to do to keep this baby safe. When the baby comes out, sudden infant death syndrome, right? When they start to crawl, we have to child-proof the house. We don't want them drinking poison. When they start to walk, we have to make sure there's stairs, to block them from falling down the stairs or sticking something in the outlet. When they're a toddler or they're in preschool, if they're playing little sports, they need their helmets. And if they're riding their tricycle and they start playing sports in the middle school, and we could go into the young adult, older adults. Oh my goodness. If they use a crutch or a cane or a walker, the assistive devices, or if there's decline in their vision and their hearing, all of that is safety until you die. And there's safety in the healthcare for us healthcare professionals. There's safety when we're moving a client. There's safety, with like OSHA and bloodborne pathogens. Safety all over. So like I said, safety is a big category. But if we don't keep clients safe, they could potentially be harmed and die. And there's safety measures with us too, right? Not recapping needles. But for us, it's only a few areas, whereas the client, much information. And then after that, above safety for Maslow's hierarchy is what we call psychosocial needs, like, friendship, feeling like you belong, those are psychosocial. So with your test questions, you want to go through the options that you have and say to yourself, is this a physical need? So the answer is, if it will kill the client, if I don't address it, then yes, it's a physical need. Is this a safety need? Will it harm the client? And then the psychosocial stuff are the emotional stuff, the, wanting a private room type of thing, or the client is crying over a new diagnosis. Those are all emotional, psychological. They will not harm the client. You never want to do those first before a physical need. Let's recap. First thing first, have I assessed, right? Once you ID, this is a priority type of question, have I assessed? If you've assessed and you don't need to validate, go ahead and implement. Okay, so if you have not assessed, removed all of your implementation options. You need to assess. So for example, you get a question that tells you have a pregnant client whose water spontaneously ruptures. Okay, she's standing in front of you, talking to you, having a conversation, her water breaks. So the first action the nurse should take should be an assessment, because you know nothing else. And the assessment you should be doing is the fetal heart rate, because that makes sense. We want to know, is this baby, still alive? So you want to stay with that mentality. Have I assessed? Now, you have more than one option left. Maslow's hierarchy. Are there physical needs there? If there is, then you want to address the physical needs first. Now, part of Maslow's physical needs are airway, breathing, and circulation, which I know you're familiar with ABC. So you have to ask yourself, is there an airway problem there? If there is, that is the first thing you need to address, because that person has less time to live. If there's no airway concerns, is there a breathing concern? You want to go ahead and address that. It's a time thing. You have less time with the airway. If there's no airway issue, you have very little time with a breathing concern. So with airway, every time you take a deep breath, we want that oxygen going all the way to the alveoli, right? Anything that stops that is an airway problem, whether it be an air embolism, a big piece of clot, right, or fat, whatever it is, or edema. You want to address that first. Now, breathing, when we say breathing, we're talking the exchange. We have to give off that waste CO2 and pick up that nutrient oxygen. Anything that impedes that is a breathing problem. It could even be positioning, right? Get the client to that right position so they can breathe properly and get oxygen to the alveoli. And your third C, circulation, heart rate, pulse, renal, right? To some degree, we know that. I'm not talking about like urine output. I'm talking about the control of your blood pressure, that the kidneys play a role in that. So we're talking from that perspective. Okay, so airway, breathing, circulation is part of that physiological need under Maslow's hierarchy. Okay, now another step I want you to keep in mind. So step 1 was the nursing process. Have you assessed? Assessment versus implementation. Step 2, Maslow's hierarchy. Physical versus safety versus psychosocial. Step 3 is actual versus potential. Often I see students go between two options. They both look great. They're both pertaining to this scenario, but one of them is actually happening and one of them is a potential problem. We always take care of actual problems first. Potential may or may not happen. So for example, if you have a client with a potential airway concern, but you have an actual compartment syndrome happening where they might lose their extremity, you want to deal with the compartment syndrome even though there's a potential airway, because it's not really happening right now. So after we take care of the actual right here, right now problem, then we can go address the potential, because you have time. Okay? So those steps, I pray you were writing these down, okay? Because this brings us to a close for this session. So I truly hope that breaking down these priority style question strategies have given you some valuable insight and boosted your confidence in tackling these in the future. Remember, it's all about careful analysis and applying the right framework. Be positive, ID whether this is a priority type of question, and then go through your steps. So next time we're going to dive into, deeper into the world of priority questions by looking at specific patient scenarios. And I want to teach you how to determine who needs your attention first. Those type of questions that tells you who do you see first. So we'll explore different patient presentations and walk through the decision-making process together on how do you prioritize who do you see first. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one. As always, if you have any questions or if there's a particular type of NCLEX style questions you'd like for us to explore or break down, please do not hesitate to reach out. We're all in this together, supporting each other every step of the way. I pray for you. I thank you for turning into Be the Drop podcast. So keep studying and do it in a smart way. Keep your faith strong. Encourage yourself in the Lord. And remember, you are making a real difference. Until next episode, keep being that drop of positive change in the world. I'm Darlene Riggs, and it was a pleasure. Bye.
you hear in the news today? So much pain, so much sorrow. Only scandals on the front page. We need brighter days and hope for tomorrow. Now is the time to show the world positivity. Shining our light, revealing the good in you and me. The drop, all that's good in community. The drop, showing the love that we all need. The drop, lifting our friends and family. The drop, oh, let us be the drop.